For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Along with Dave Manouk, along with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours, all about the Winnipeg Jets. Excited to talk more about your local hometown hockey team ahead of the Jets and the Colorado Avalanche, a division rival matchup a little bit later on tonight. That's taking place in downtown Winnipeg, which means it's a double dip of Illegal Curve with the IC postgame show coming up in about 12 hours. Time. Busy day ahead. We're so thrilled you're able to start it off with us on this Saturday morning. Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, gentlemen, great to see you. It's been, about 11 hours since we last got back together, but nice to see you, and I hope you spent those 11 hours bettering yourselves as people and bettering the community around you.
Always, Drew. That's what we always do. I mean, I was mainly sleeping, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, that might be bettering the community, let's be honest.
Yeah, I would put that down as bettering the community for sure, but obviously a disappointing loss. The Jets weren't able to get the extra point last night against a very good LA Kings team. We talked about it quite a bit on the post-game show. We'll probably talk about it a little bit tonight, but that LA Kings team, I think, is not going to be an easy out in the playoffs. And even though they don't have a lot of star power, they're just playing really well under Jim Hiller. But as you mentioned, Drew, the Avalanche oftentimes bring out the best in the Jets. We saw that late in the regular season last year, obviously, with that big 7-0 win, right? You guys remember that?
Yeah. And
for one game, at least, in the best of 7 series, it looked pretty good for the Jets, even though it didn't look great defensively. But obviously, Dave, they got to get back on the right track here because, halfway through this 8-game homestand, a season-long 8-game homestand, the results have been pretty disappointing so far.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. You're right, Ez, that this Jets team isn't going to be happy. We know that they can afford to go 500 pretty much and still be no problems for the playoffs, but that's not what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to get back on track. And like I said, they may not get back to that 730 winning percentage, Ezzy, but you know that they want to get things rolling where they're winning 2, 3 out of 4 or whatever it's going to be. So yeah, there's no question that they were. I would think that they're probably happy-ish with yesterday's performance. I mean, again, slow start
by both teams, really.
By both teams, yeah. I mean, but shots were. I think they were 4-1 for a significant portion of that first period. The Jets were focused on shot quality, not shot volume. Ezzy, I like how they said that on the broadcast. I'm like, I'm not so sure I believe that, Kevin. but okay, I'm pretty sure they'd be happy to be a shot volume team in addition to being a shot quality team. But regardless of that, I mean, again, you have to respect your opponent, and there's no question that the Kings have a style that doesn't allow for free-flowing hockey. Again, not that the Jets want to play run and gun, but I just think that you take the point, and like you said on last night's show, Drew, it's a little bit of an unusual 1-1 and 2 run to
record,
start the halfway point of this. It's an 8-game homestand, right? So
yes, it is 8 games.
Yeah, so they're halfway through it, but I think the bigger picture, as he likes to focus on the bigger picture, not sometimes the looking at game by game, even though I know the Jets focus is game by game. But I think one of the things that they're looking at this 19 days in Winnipeg as is a real big opportunity to heal up, rest up, recover, and of course work on things in practice, which is what we saw kind of an unusual drill the other day. And to the point of Scott Arniel said it's going to be kind of a playoff style drill to really kind of limit space. So, they know they're ratcheting it up, and they're of course focused on the 4 nations and getting to that break, which is in about a month's time. But right now that's kind of the focus, is just to kind of, like I said, get these guys back to healthy, let them build up some reserves, because, again, like this is a very unusual schedule. And so they'll have to take advantage of it as best they can.
Yeah, no question about it. And it all starts to they want to get back on the positive side of the ledger tonight against the Colorado Avalanche. And we'll get into the Avs game throughout the course of the next couple hours here on the broadcast. Sarah Orlesky going to join us in about 25 minutes time. Jeff Merrick from Daily Faceoff going to join us at the top of hour number 2 as well. So lots to come this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. If you haven't already done so, be sure to smash the like button. Show, of course, presented by our friends at Play Now. But, I wanted to sort of take a bit of a step back as opposed to focus on last night's game and, focus on tonight's game right at this point in the show. We're at the halfway mark. So we're a little beyond the halfway mark. It's, we reached the halfway mark, I guess, with the game last night, or with the game on Tuesday night against Nashville Predators. So it's the first time we've had an opportunity to get back together for 2 hours and talk about sort of the bigger picture, as Dave, you were just referencing. As we're sitting here, 43 games into the season, Jets are where they want to be atop their division. It's been great to start the season, been a little bit more mediocre since then, but you still get the points that you earned before. What to you guys, as you sort of take your sort of 10,000 foot view, what's your biggest sort of takeaway or your biggest sort of impression through halfway of this Winnipeg Jets season? And then conversely, what are you keeping your closest eye on for the second half of the year, now that we're into, the back half of the schedule, just into it, but slightly into it nonetheless?
I can start off, and I'll start with your second question, Drew. In terms of, what I'm focused on the second half of the season, I'm focused on the Jets and their lack of scoring at 5-on-5. I've put a little something here together, and these numbers are not impressive. Alex Iafallo, 1 goal in 13 games. Nino Niederreiter, 1 goal, 15 games. Adam Lowry, 1 goal in his last 10 games. Cole Perfetti, no goals in his last 8 games. Vladislav Nemesnikov, no goals in his last 8 games. These are top 9 players, guys, and that's not 1 game, that's not 2 games, and that's not 3 games. We're talking 8 to 15 game stretches here.
A quarter of the season so far.
Exactly, really. Right? So, that's what I'm most concerned about, and I'm keeping an eye on, because we all expect the Jets to make a move here, and it could be a top 4 defenseman, but I think everybody is looking at this top 9, not just top 6, this top 9 right now. And I think Alex Iafallo had a fantastic game yesterday. I thought he was great on the penalty kill, but he's got 1 goal in his last 13 games, right? And yes, he's a 4th line guy, so he gets less minutes. He's only been on the 3rd line since Mason Appleton came out of the lineup. Excuse me. But when you're talking about guys like Cole Perfetti, Vladislav Nemesnikov, these are 2nd line guys, whether you want to call it 2A or 2B. So
they're guys
that's my major concern.
Need to get on the score sheet, regardless of where you want to slot them.
So again, I'm painting a bit of a bleak picture here, boys. But you look at this homestand, and you take out the Nashville game, and the Jets are averaging a couple goals a game, and this is a team that on the season has averaged 3.5 goals a game. So to answer your first question, Drew, I think that what stands out about the first half is that Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor are arguably playing the best hockey of their careers, both on pace for 50 goal seasons. Connor Hellebuyck has elevated his game yet again from his Vezina winning form of last year. So that stands out. Neil Pionk, I think, is having a bounce back season. And obviously the big thing is the power play, boys. The power play is number 1 in the NHL. I can't remember a time aside from the 2017-18 season where the Jets power play looked this dangerous. I think it's even more dangerous than it was 7 years ago, Dave, when they had Dustin Byfuglien and Patrick Laine and Blake Wheeler out there, right? So that's what stands out to me about the first half of the season, is just how amazing Hellebuyck has been, how Scheifele and Connor have not only just been excellent offensively, but specifically Kyle Connor, I think, is playing the best defensive hockey of his career. But I still maintain, and I'm going to keep talking about it, I'm still concerned about the Jets' lack of scoring. And it's not just secondary scoring. We're talking about a second line now that has been struggling for weeks now, not just days.
So Dave, let me ask you this, and I want your opinion. To Ezzy's point there, does that change the priority that this team needs to be looking for come trade deadline time, which is here, by the way? This is trade deadline time. This is in and around the time where moves started to be made last year. Teams aren't necessarily waiting until the buzzer. If there's an opportunity to bounce early or jump early on a player that they might covet, they've been doing so. So Ezzy makes very valid points about the lack of secondary scoring beyond Scheifele, Connor, Velarde. Imagine if the power play just slows down a bit. We've talked about this, but if the power play all of a sudden is, top 10, maybe it's 10th for a stretch of games, not first. What does that do to this Jets team and their fortunes? So does that change the calculus that the team needs to be making regarding additions and improvements to this roster?
No, I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because I don't think the calculus has changed at all. I think, look, you've gotten as much as you can get out of this group in terms of production. But the second line specifically, and as he just outlined it, and remember, Nino Niederreiter, even though he's a third liner, his goal was an empty net goal, right? So these guys, you need more production. The first line is producing, there's no question about that. But the second line is just not getting it done. And I'm not going to quibble about what line is the second line in terms of minutes. We just know who we're talking about, of course, with Vlad Namestnikov. And again, Vlad Namestnikov is serviceable, but he's not a 2C on a championship team. He's a 4C. And so,
but is Cole Perfetti even a second line winger on a championship team right now?
I don't know. He's not a driver. I think he can be a complementary piece. I think if you bring in someone who is an established bona fide second line center, I actually think Cole Perfetti, I don't think will ever be a driver of a line the way Kyle Connor can be a driver, the way Nikolai Ehlers can be a driver, the way Mark Scheifele or Gabriel Velarde. Those four guys I just mentioned are all drivers of lines. I don't think Cole Perfetti is a driver of a line. I think Cole Perfetti can be a complementary piece at this point in his career. I'm not saying he can never get to that point. He's, of course, quite a bit younger than all of those guys. But I just think that if you ask me, I think that if you brought in a 2C, and I'm not even going to throw a name, it doesn't matter. But the point is, if you bring in a 2C that he can complement, I think he's fine in that role, especially with Nikolai Ehlers, a.k.a. a driver on that line. So I don't have as big a problem with Cole Perfetti, even though I agree you have to produce more than he is right now. But I would think that, to my view, it's more of a function of can you get him a player that he can play with. So I still look at this team and I say, okay, you still need a 2C to be a championship club, or at least to be a real Stanley Cup contender, that sort of thing. And I also think you still need to augment the depth in the top four of the D. So I do think that they are a very good team. I'm not going to malign the Winnipeg Jets. Do I think they're an elite team? I don't think there is an elite team in the NHL. I think Vegas is as close to that as you're going to see. But I really don't even know that there is an elite team in the NHL. I think there's some very good.
The problem
teams.
is, right, Dave, the word elite gets thrown around.
Especially by Mindell. Especially by Mindell.
Exactly.
I don't think I've used it much this year so far. I got to be honest.
But I know that everybody always wants you to be using that word. So
it's too subjective.
No, and so I just think that nothing has really changed for me in terms of the Jets' needs, regardless of how they're playing right now. I still think that they need to augment their depth on D. And I still think, in an ideal world, again, if you're going to shoot for it, because I've just listed off the reason why there's no elite teams, and you have as good a chance as anyone to really get out with the way Connor Hellebuyck is playing. If you can get a true top pairing right side guy for Josh Morrissey and bump everybody else down, or if you can get that really effective 2C, then you're talking. But again, Drew, just to tell you that's my answer, but it's no different than any answer I would have given you throughout the course of the season. Right. And in terms of what's really stood out for me, and I'm not going to go super long on this one, but as touched on it a little bit, it's the power play. You just can't even argue. Last year, the Jets were the 22nd ranked power play. Their percentage, I think they were 18% effectiveness. This year they're 32.3. So, or 18.8. I don't want to short them a little bit, but 18.8 last year to 32.3. That's insane. That's a significant jump. And just to answer Ezzy's question about how good they were in 17-18, 23.4%. They were the 5th overall power play in the NHL in that year, that historic year here in Winnipeg. So I think that there's no question that, the power play is made a radical difference to this team winning hockey games, in addition to obviously to Connor Hellebuyck. But an interesting dialogue that I would advocate that folks listen to is assistant coach Davis Payne was on the Sportsnet with Mike Fuda and I can't remember the other guy's name. But anyways, we have it on illegalcurve.com. And he was asked about the power play, what's different this year. And he kind of went into his philosophy on the power play. So if you haven't listened to it yet, I do have it on illegalcurve.com. And then the last thing I will say, just to, again, to kind of buttress one of Ezzy's points, you obviously have to focus on Connor Hellebuyck, because for a goaltender who is a 2-time Vezina winner, who has been an excellent goaltender his entire career and one of the best in the league, he has now elevated that to an elite goaltender. We'll use elite in that instance and Drew, because I think it's fair to talk about with respect to Connor Hellebuyck. So there is, again, I've watched him. I've covered him since not really the Ice Caps days, because obviously, as we weren't in St. John's, but we covered him with.
Well, why weren't you? Why?
I don't know. It wasn't in the budget. It wasn't in the budget, but we did cover him since his time with the Moose. And the Moose interviewed him for, yesterday, and they talked to him and just in terms of his growth. And we've seen so much growth from this young man who, as I put out on XAds the other day, has more wins than the 9 other goaltenders that have played for this franchise, including Peter Menino for that one period against the Florida Panthers back in, I think it was 11 and 12. But the things we're seeing from Connor Hellebuyck are spectacular. And it's shocking to see a guy who was a Vezina winner and he is defeating what he was able to do previously this year.
So 33 games so far for Connor Hellebuyck of the 43 that the Winnipeg Jets have played. How many more starts do you think he gets? Ezzy, I know that you wanted to discuss this, in our pre-show dialogue. You mentioned that you wanted to bring it up. 39 games left moving forward at this point for the Jets after Friday's game against the Kings.
And he's obviously getting at least one of those, right? He's starting tonight, right? But
at least one of the 39 he's going to get. You're right. Exactly.
He might get a second. I'm not sure, boys. I think he'll get a second. But I think what's the most interesting about it is because we talk about this every single year in terms of, managing Hellebuck's workload. But I think this year, because of the Four Nations tournament, it's even more imperative that the Jets manage his workload. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how many of these next 39 games he gets, because
the Jets don't have a back-to-back. Just sorry for interrupting. They don't have a back-to-back after this weekend until the Four Nations break. So there's no back-to-back situations where there's an obvious Eric Comrie start in there.
Right. And, based on how many games, like you said, he's already played, Drew, he's played 33 of 43. So, I haven't done the exact math, but, you would expect, of those 39 games, he gets somewhere around, under normal circumstances, maybe he gets 28 to 30 of those 39 starts. But I think with the Four Nations tournament, and the fact that I think also, guys, what has to be factored in too is, where the Jets are in the standings, right? Like, I think, last year, obviously, there was the big second half collapse. But I think if the Jets are able to maintain, a decent winning percentage, I think then you're probably going to see even more of Eric Comrie in the last, 10 to 15 games of the season. But I think, it's going to ultimately come down to that. And also, they're probably going to manage his workload a little bit more heading into the Four Nations tournament and coming out of the Four Nations tournament. So if I had to guess, I'll say he gets 28 of the last 39 games.
Go back to last year, remember, where the Jets were, in a similar position. They were a very good hockey team. They were towards the top of their division, and they were certainly looked like they were going to win the Jennings Trophy last year. And there was the talk, would they get Laurent Brossoit another start? Or I don't remember if it was one start or two starts, so his name would be on. It was just one, right? And they didn't give him that start, even though the Jets were comfortably.
They could have given him, Drew. They didn't have to give him a start. They could have given him like a half a period.
Right. And they didn't.
One game, one shot. Actually didn't need a shot. Just go in for 1 minute.
Well, and they didn't do that. So, 39 games to your point there, Ezzy. I have to believe that, and there's 2 back-to-backs left.
Mm-hmm.
After this weekend, there's 2 back-to-backs left for the remainder of the year. Does Eric Comrie get 9 starts of those 39, Dave? I don't know that he does. Not to this, which isn't necessarily a comment on his play, even though we know that he's, in the midst of that losing streak, that the Jets haven't been scoring for him. But the way Connor Hellebuyck's been going and the way that, he's been sort of economical with a lot of his movements, and the team has been pretty decent with shot suppression. It just seems like it's Connor Hellebuyck, old school, 70 plus starts sort of thing. Not 70, but certainly going to be 68, I would suspect.
He's no Arturs Irbe or Marty Brodeur, Ezzy, that's for sure, in terms of those amount of games.
Or Grant Fuhr, for that matter.
Yeah, we don't want to give him quite that mantle just yet. But look, Drew, if you look at it from a math percentage, I guess, he's played 76% of the games to date.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you kind of continue on that trajectory, if he does keep that pace up, which I tend to think that they'll actually reduce it. But if he does, then realistically, and of course the playoff race and how they're doing that all that matters. But ultimately, I think that, they recognize that in addition to their team, and I blame Rick Bowness for that in terms of the lack of adjustment to Colorado and how the Avs came at them, and they really didn't adjust their style to handle the Avs. Right. But I don't think there's any question that Connor Hellebuyck wasn't at his elite level in the playoffs. And we haven't seen that from this team, from a team that was very good in the regular season for a number of years. We haven't seen them take that step up like we did in 17-18. So for the Jets, for Connor Hellebuyck, realistically, if they kept up on this sort of same trajectory, you're expecting, as Ezzy said, 29 games for him, 10 for Eric Comrie. My thought, and I remember I went back and I looked at the Stanley Cup winning goaltenders, how many games they tend to play over, I looked at like 10, 15 years, something like that. And I think for the most part, it was somewhere like 56 to 58 games. That's how many games those guys on average played. And again, does it contribute to them being fresher and ready to go in the playoffs? Maybe it does, because we've seen it happen. So there aren't many goaltenders like Connor Hellebuyck left. We know he likes to play, but I do think that there might be a bit of an attitude adjustment based on the fact that, as you heard his dad say, right, as he doesn't want to win a Vezina. He doesn't want to win individual. He doesn't want to win the William Jennings. He wants to win the Stanley Cup. So he will do, I think, in that regard, Drew, because he's basically like locked up the Vezina. It doesn't seem like obviously there's still half a season to go, but from my perspective, if he
plays like this, you can put his name in there.
And so I just think that he doesn't need to play that many more games. And I think you have to be smart in terms of Eric Comrie has given you more than enough of himself to win hockey games. And people can malign him and say he's not an NHL goaltender. First of all, as I've often referenced, as when in horse racing, when you have the thoroughbred, you always have a pony that kind of walks it to the gate, keeps it calm. Eric Comrie's that pony. And he really is. He and Connor Hellebuyck, I'm not saying that Laurent Brossoit didn't have an excellent relationship, but there's no question that this team loves Eric Comrie. Now, they don't necessarily show that by playing as effectively in front of him, but
a strange way of showing it.
But I'm just saying that I think that they really enjoy having him on the team. And I think that he does bring, a calm in Connor Hellebuyck. And I just think that you give Hellebuyck, 25 more games, because that would get him to 58. And then you give Comrie maybe 14. And I think, like I said, if this team, Comrie wasn't the reason the Jets lost last night's game, right? It wasn't Eric Comrie's fault. You can't point to Eric Comrie and say he cost them the game. So I think that he gives you a chance to win every night. And I think that if you're being smart, you're going to try and pull back a little bit on Hellebuyck, pace him out specifically because of that Four Nations as, which we aren't really even factoring in right now, is going to add some strain on him. So I think, you pull him back to 25 games and you give Comrie the remaining 14.
So
I'll be surprised if Comrie gets that many.
So I just did some quick math here. So what Dave is saying, we're talking about 25 games versus 28 games. So we're talking, we could split the difference, Dave, and say, we think he's going to start 26 and a half games.
Yes.
But so far this season, Hellebuyck has started 77, rounded off to 77% of the games. So based on what I said, 28 out of 39. So again, 39 games left. If Hellebuyck were to start 28 of those games, that's 72%.
So that's why I think he starts more. I think he starts closer to 30 of the last 39. I think he gets up to.
What I'm trying to say, Drew, is I'm saying that he starts 5% less than he's been starting to this point. What Dave is predicting, there's no wrong answer, Drew.
No, I agree.
I'm just
speculating.
I'm just throwing out some numbers. Dave is saying that he expects Hellebuyck. Again, these are just projections. 64%. I'm saying 71%, and his average to date. He's played 77% of the game. So what we're saying is, based on previous years and the fact that there's an argument to be made that he should be playing a little bit less. I think it's probably going to be somewhere in between the two. I think it's probably going to be, 26 to 29 games, something like that. And then, Comrie's getting, 10 to 12 of the remaining 39 games.
And look, we won't. I mean, obviously, we'll know the answer by the end of the season. I'd be surprised, assuming everybody stays healthy, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be surprised if Hellebuyck isn't closer to between 63 and 65 games at the end of this all. So I think he starts another 30 of the last, 39 games the Jets play. I just think that, all signs to it, especially with the way the schedule's lined up, where there's the two back-to-backs left between now and the end of the season. All signs, I think, point to Hellebuyck playing more to a similar percentage to what they've been.
That would be
playing
literally
so
the exact, just so you know, Drew, 30 of 39 would be exactly the percentage he's already played. That would be 77%.
And I don't see them reining him in very much, is what I'm saying there.
Yeah,
so,
no, it's fair. I mean, past, not that history always repeats itself, right, boys?
Right.
But I mean, like Hellebuyck has averaged a very similar workload from year to year. And every year we talk about this. The only reason I'm bumping it down a few games is because of the Four Nations tournament.
And the only thing, I'll just finish my last thought on this, because sure, history has shown you that that's what he's done, but let's also look at the reality, which is the Jets have not been a extremely effective team in the playoffs since 17-18, right? So this is, I mean, obviously you had the bubble year, but the bubble boy year, but the fact of the matter is that you really he is your number one asset. There's, again, every other guy, there are guys who have huge importance to this team, but he is your number one asset. And I think you have to manage your number one asset accordingly and be smart about it. And I truly think, look, he could be the starting goaltender and play the entire Four Nations. That's going to factor in terms of when he comes back, how they're going to use him versus Eric Comrie, I think. So it's a fun exercise and it's an interesting discussion, and we'll see, in whatever it is, 4 months, boys, whether we're close. But I think we're all in the same sort of ballpark of what we think it's going to be.
Drew, can I throw out my Marty Brodeur stat?
By all means, Ezra. I know that you can't possibly not talk about Marty Brodeur. So what kind of human would I be to not let you say something?
I wanted to just, there's a lot of things that are being talked about with Hellebuyck, rightfully so. I think he's absolutely a Hart Trophy candidate right now, arguably a Hart Trophy favorite. At the very least, he's in the conversation. I think most people aren't going to argue with that. And I'm going to go, and this is a hot take, but I absolutely think he's already a Hall of Famer at this point in his career. I'm not going to hear any other arguments. I think at 31 years old, he's already done enough to get himself in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he needs a Stanley Cup. His numbers are just ridiculous. Second fastest goalie to 300 wins. That alone almost gets you in the Hall of Fame, right, boys? For him to catch Martin Brodeur, who has 691 regular season wins, Hellebuyck has averaged 34 wins, taking out the bubble year. He has averaged 34 wins. If Hellebuyck is to tie Martin Brodeur, he will have to average 34 wins for 11 and a half years. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there. Marty Brodeur is still the GOAT.
It's a big hill to climb. I just quickly, though, I know there's a lot of talk about the Four Nations and the workload and everything else. It's not the most taxing schedule during the Four Nations tournament. No. Sure, the majority of the league is going to be off enjoying the sunshine and everything else, but it's not. There's no back-to-backs. You're talking about, if he plays every game, including the championship game, you're talking about a schedule of Thursday, Saturday, Monday, Thursday, which is a pretty normal NHL schedule. That's all I'm saying with regard to the Four Nations tournament. I don't think it's an overwhelmingly taxing schedule. Now, the quality and caliber is pretty damn high. There's no bad teams in the Four Nations, but so that might be a factor there. But I don't think that the schedule itself in the Four Nations is going to
but I mean, you're just
down.
Again, it goes from your regular season being 82 games to potentially an 86 game regular season. So again,
I'm sure the NHL is moving to an 86-game regular season anyway.
God have mercy on our souls if that's the case, because as much as I enjoy doing the post-game show, they need to reduce.
They're talking 84. They're talking 84 for the next.
Yeah, but they're also talking about getting rid of exhibition games.
That's true, but we don't do post-game on exhibition games.
Honestly, Drew, I would take 84 regular season games if it meant 1 or 2 preseason games.
I mean, I don't pay attention to preseason hockey, so
that's what I'm saying, Drew.
Look, there's no Young Stars tournament anymore, as the Canucks got rid of that.
Did they?
Yeah. Just the news came out 2 days ago, I think, that the Young Stars tournament is over. So the question as to where those Jets prospects will go, I mean, I don't think it's much value. I think the teams are wasting their money. I think you can play intra-squad games. And they're just
I guess we won't be watching Marcus Loppinen and Penticton this year.
We will not. You can watch him in Victoria.
Still watching him, though. Don't worry.
He had 2 goals last night for the Victoria Royals. So you can always watch Marcus Loppinen whatever you want. But you will not watch him on a Young Stars tournament.
Well, you're going to watch Sarah Orlesky up next here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So we'll go to break and bring Sarah back. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on a Saturday morning. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show presented by Play Now. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on the Saturday morning. The Jets and the Colorado Avalanche a little bit later on tonight. The Illegal Curve postgame show follows the Jets and the Avs. Thrilled to welcome to the program our good friend Sarah Orlesky. Sarah, good morning. Great to see you. How are things?
Good morning. Look, things are great. Although for whatever reason, it feels very early this morning. I feel for you guys already, having been talking for over half an hour, because these double headers are and this long homestand are certainly they're tiring. Listen to me complain as if I'm playing out there.
It's all about, you got to spend more time in the ice tub after the game. Make sure you get the rest and recovery. The sports medicine. You got to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
That's an excellent point. I really do need to treat myself more as if I'm a professional athlete. I'm going to put myself in a bubble.
I think you have a hyperbaric chamber in the house. Maybe you need to put one of those inside and just make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Exactly. Chris Mason was telling a story one day with Jamie Thomas and I on check-in about how, and I'm trying to think of who it was that he was his goaltending partner, and he said that Scully refused to speak on game days, and so to anyone, the wife, anybody, and would just text during the day. And so maybe that's what I'm going to start to do. I'm going to tell my husband, I'm starting to think I'm going to take a goalie mentality on this. Just going to put myself in a bubble. I'm going to, be all in.
Jamie's definitely not going to handle that very well.
Yeah, are you kidding? He might love it. If I told him that I wasn't going to talk anymore on game days, he'd probably be thrilled.
Well, speaking of goaltenders, Sarah, let's start with last night's the pregame ceremony. The honorific of Connor Hellebuyck, well deserved. I mean, just we've all been there for so many years. We've all seen his brilliance up close and personal since he really became a regular here in Winnipeg and his career took off. Just maybe a memory or two from you, being on the inside and just, the Connor Hellebuyck experience and just how special it's been to observe for all these years.
Well, it absolutely has been. I regularly have said that I don't think that you truly, because we've been around it for so long now and you see it on a day-to-day basis, I think that it's easy to forget what it is like or what it would be like to not have a Hall of Fame goaltender there to save everybody on a regular basis. Let's be honest, he's the backbone of the team. And while this team has improved defensively immensely from what we saw a number of years ago when Connor was first establishing himself, still he is such a big part and the reason why they are where they are right now. But to see the evolution of him, I think is really interesting. You think about when he was early on and he would get pulled and he always had the confidence. We've all spoken about it for so many years that, he would get pulled in a game. And then you guys remember the famous scrums where he would say afterwards that he loves where his game is at. And remember, you just let in, I don't know, let's say 5 goals. What are you possibly, great that you have confidence, but what are you seeing that makes you think right now that your game is in a good spot? But he's always had that confidence and he always knew that he could get where he was. His dad, Chuck Hellebuyck, has spoken about the confidence that he's always had. So I think it's great to see that. What I've really liked over the last couple of years is that, last year we did a home ice with him. We've really seen him embrace more of that mental health side in terms of making a difference. That's something that he's very passionate about. I think as he gets older, matures, like so many of us do, once you have a family, your perspective changes a little bit. He's won a couple of Vezinas, you get more comfortable in your skin as well, that you don't feel maybe that need to prove yourself to that same extent because people are talking about you and respect you that way. And then what I've loved the most is that this season we've started to do 3-star interviews on the bench. And after he got that 300th win, And the way that he spoke to the crowd is that he and the fans there, he's always the one that really speaks to them. All of them thank the fans, all of them acknowledge how great they are, and the atmosphere inside Canada Life Center has been great this season. But he's the one that really, almost showman style, turns and does the "you guys have been great" and really talks to them. And I think that he has a special, connection with them like that. And I think it's been great to see.
I was actually going to ask you about that, Sarah, because your interview with Hellebuyck on the bench, like that was as authentic as it gets, right? Like you could literally feel the appreciation he had for the crowd. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I do have a serious question, but I have a not so serious question. How do we get Chuck Hellebuyck to move to Winnipeg permanently? Like, is there a way we can do that? Because it's just like he just brings way too much joy to too many Jets fans for him to still live in Michigan.
Do you know what? So I didn't have the opportunity to be in the bowl last night and hear the ceremony and the videos for it, because I was leaving from where I do the top of the show in the Zamboni area, and then I was making my way back upstairs. But you could hear that when the videos were playing, I mean, obviously the roar for Dustin Byfuglien went without saying. You knew that one was going to be an absolute hit. But then the roar for Chuck as well. We were joking yesterday. So Jamie McLennan was on with JT and I, and he said something about Chuck. And if you're not in the market, you don't necessarily understand that. Think, player's dad. You don't understand how much people love Chuck and have really, bought in and run with that idea of international influencer and have some fun with him. And I think it's great. And the appreciation that Chuck has for this city and this fan base and the way that they have embraced his family is certainly evident as well. So I think it's great. I'm all for Chuck. He'll be at the game tonight. Hopefully it leads to a Hellebuyck and Jets win.
Absolutely. And my serious question, even though I was actually kind of serious about that, but right before you came on, Sarah, we were talking about, and this is something that I know you and Jamie have talked about, and it's something that gets talked about around these parts year after year, Hellebuyck's workload, right? And I was nerding out on some math here and breaking down some numbers, and Hellebuyck has started 77% of the game so far, and we were kind of each giving our, guess as to how many starts Hellebuyck was going to make for the rest of the season. I'm not going to ask you to make a guess, but are you expecting the workload? Like, is there a good chance his workload is lessened a little bit considering the Four Nations tournament? I know that's a hot button topic, but it's kind of hard, right? Because you have to balance that with Hellebuyck wants to start every single game, right?
100%. I'm so glad that you didn't ask me to give a percentage. I'm glad you've been nerding out with the math this morning. But
you already mentioned it's early, Sarah. We're not going to ask you to get into percentages.
I've got my phone with the calculator out, trying to discreetly do some math. Some division. I think that's going to be really interesting, because to me, that's one of the biggest question marks. Even if there wasn't the Four Nations, that would be one of the biggest question marks in the second half of the season, particularly late in the season. Because as much we know he would play, he would play pretty much every game if he could, and we know how important he is. But I do think that it's as much as he has played extremely well, I think it'll be fascinating, given what we've seen in terms of postseason play historically, whether they try to lighten the load a little bit. But I think that it so much depends on the standings too. As much as you might want to give him workload, if it's a tight three-way race, or even if Winnipeg's, let's say, in first, but you've got Minnesota right behind you and you're coming down the stretch, I don't know how you can. That's because you don't want to finish second or third in this division. You want to win this division, especially because if you're looking, you do not want to play any semblance of Minnesota, Dallas, or Colorado in the first round. You don't, right? So I think that it's imperative that and not to say that obviously that they can't win it, but you you don't want to be faced in that situation, to be in that situation if you can help it. So I think that it'll be very dependent upon where they are in the standings as to how they can deploy him going forward. And I think it'll certainly be a storyline, especially as we come out of the Four Nations and you look in that kind of mid-March range. You've got, let's say, a month left of the regular season. How do you utilize him? Where are you in the standings? And one of the things that you think about how they got off to that great start, historic start to the season, and they were always so even keel with it. But it's not as if they were able to create this great deal of separation between themselves. We haven't seen any separation, like, because of the job that Minnesota has done. And then with their teams, it's the hope, I think, from talking to some of the players, Leon, the benefit was that maybe down the stretch, when you inevitably go through lulls, like every team does at some point, that if you do drop 2 in a row or you do drop 3 in a row, that you don't have that same sort of panic and pressure having to go, because I think that we sometimes underestimate. We talk about the physical side of it. It is mentally taxing if you are looking at that schedule at the back half of March going, oh, wow, we need to win 8 of the next 10 games. We need to go on an Oilers-esque run of what we saw last year in order to get into the postseason. And so then if you get into the postseason and then you're both mentally and physically tired from it, I think it would have an impact. So that is an incredibly long answer to say that I think it's all going to depend on where they are in the standings. I think that they would like to see him probably at a little bit of rest, but he's also a goaltender of routine. So it'll be something that you guys and everyone else will be talking about a lot as the season goes on. No doubt about it.
Well, Sarah, one thing we've been talking about, of course, is Dylan Samberg, TikTok star, because, of course, he missed half of the season dealing with that recovery from his broken foot that he suffered back on November 23rd in Nashville. And speaking of Nashville,
just for a second, I have to say, and Sarah will appreciate it. He broke his foot on a monster block in Nashville.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
That's so Sarah and I understand. It's a volleyball reference that Sarah and I understand.
Right.
Okay,
It was just Sarah, but it's just a matter of time before Drew talks about the volleyball game he went to in Kentucky.
Yeah, well,
so that's coming up.
We'll save that for the end of the show.
Look, Dave's like, get back on track, please, you two. Jeez, that's gonna be Drew and I have our own show. That'll be going on at 11 o'clock when we talk college.
Right.
I don't know if there's a thing called an illegal spike or
volleyball.
something, but he can do that. But no, I mean, look, I think that the Jets fans after the game against Nashville, of course, with Josh Morrissey, hitting the post the way he did and leaving, coming back and then leaving again, there was a lot of trepidation in Jets Nation because this year, unlike last year, the nature of the injuries to all the defense have been so significant. But one guy, of course, who's been healthy has been Josh Morrissey. And of course, we know how critical he is to this team. But one guy that we talked about, Sarah, last week on the show was Dylan Samberg and how important and how integral he is to this lineup. And Scott O'Neill's talked about it the last few days as, Dylan's been coming back and skating every single day. I know he was definitely not looking forward to answering the question about TikTok, but, he had some fun with it, of course, yesterday when we talked to him in the media availability. But from your perspective, have we kind of now established, seeing the first 21 games of the season with Dylan Samberg and then the past 21 that he missed of the season, are we just learning how important he has become to this team?
I think absolutely. And full credit to Dylan for what he's been able to do and the off-season work that he did in order to get himself to that position that he could not only play in the top 4, which he knew, that was the path that he was destined for anyways within this organization. We knew that that was going to be the plan, but he took it and he ran with it, because it's one thing to be given it. We've seen players be given opportunities, whether you're talking about on the blue line in a top 4 capacity, if you're talking about a forward in a top 6 role, and haven't run with it, right? We've seen guys that have been anointed it and that haven't produced the way that we expected that they would. He has. And I was asking Scott O'Neill actually about Samberg's game yesterday and said, he gave him credit for the job that he's done in continuing to evolve his game and taking that next step. And so I asked him about what the biggest difference is. What was that next step they need to take? And so it was adding that extra layer of, if you're going to play in the top 4, you need to also have an offensive component. I mean, you're playing with your top forwards, and so they expect you to get them the puck as well. And so while we saw him previously maybe more in that defensive defenseman sort of role, he needed to add another layer to his game as well to be able to have success in there, because there are expectations and there are different, not just in terms of minutes, but the style of game that you have to play, and the level obviously is different when you're on that second pairing or in a top four role as opposed to that third. And he's done that. And I think that we saw, whether it be on the penalty kill, we saw, I think, also, to be honest, in the play of Neil Pionk as well, but how important he is. Plus, whether it's through TikTok that you've seen it or the interviews, I mean, the guy has a great personality. He's a really, really nice guy. And I think that he can help keep things light. He's a bit of a jokester too, and that's important. So I think that both on and off the ice, we've seen how important he's become. And I love to see players continue to grow and take advantage of the opportunities that have been given for him. And the Winnipeg Jets need him. And as you mentioned, I mean, with the injuries that they have had, I had one of our stats, John Matheson, who works with our Jets broadcast, look up for me just the injuries, because last year they were so healthy. And in the first 48 games, taking Ville Heinola out of the mix last season, they had 2 regulars miss games. And that was Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt both missed a game apiece for illness.
Right.
I mean, you think last year nobody could get in the lineup if you were on the blue line because they were forever healthy. And then this year they just kept, I mean, the depth that they needed, because they just keep going down with more significant injuries, a number of them. I think that Samberg has stepped up to the plate, and I think he's absolutely proven how important he is to this team and success that they have going forward this season.
Sarah Orlesky, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. Show is, of course, presented by our friends at Play Now. Sarah, last night in his post-game comments, Scott Arniel said that the game against the Kings was as close to playoff hockey as the Jets have seen this year. Now, the regular season is all nice and good, but everybody knows, the organization, the fans, everybody knows that it's all about the playoffs and, improved playoff success for this team. How do you think the Jets are sort of maybe going to adapt their mindset over the remainder of the season so that they are ready to play playoff hockey come the end of the regular season, as opposed to the last few years where they've really struggled when the games have gotten to be more important come playoff time?
First, I'm not going to lie. I really hope that that's not the playoff hockey that we're seeing in April.
Thank you, Sarah.
Pretty dull, wasn't it?
I mean, it was not the most, like when you go, but I mean, defensively, it's like when you watch a defensive battle in a football game and we'll go, but it's a great defensive battle. But that's super.
But give us more touchdowns.
Yeah,
exactly. Just a little bit. Could we have a little bit more balance? But they did do, it was a 1-goal game, and they did do a good job defensively as well, just to give them credit. But I think that, of course, I think that you see several markets now where, as much as the regular season is obviously critical, because if you're not playing well, if you don't have success in the regular season, it's not going to matter about the postseason because you're not going to get there. Right. I think that this was the year going into the season where I was most intrigued by it, because I thought that when the players exited last year, that there just seemed to be a different tone to those exit availabilities, where it almost as if they maybe understood, had a better idea this time around as to what it was going to take to have success in the postseason. And I can't remember if we've talked about this before, and you guys probably have, but it was the first time that they had gone into a series in which they had played a Stanley Cup champion team. I mean, that core group that had from Colorado before. Other times they had faced teams that would go on to win a cup, but not necessarily ones where you look and think the way that Colorado was able to turn it around from the end of that regular season and the games that they played to what they did to have success in the playoffs was a marked difference. I think that Scott Arniel has done a very good job about really keeping the players in the moment, but stressing to them the importance of the style of play. And I when you look at the schedule going forward, I think that it'll be very interesting to see how they do. They have made a bunch of progress so far this season, I think, in terms of their resiliency when they are down. I mean, as when they're down by 1 goal, even when they're down by 2 goals, you can look at it. There is no panic. I would never, you never want to leave, you'd never leave a game early, or you'd be foolish to turn off a game early if they're on the road, because this is a team that certainly has shown their ability to score in bunches and be able to bounce back. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think that is the next step for them, but they need to get comfortable in the style play. But I think with the maturity of this group, that's the next step that you're looking to see. Kyle Connor made reference earlier this season about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it's not always a straight line to get to postseason success. And I think that that's very true. This is a more mature group. This is a tight-knit group. They have bought in to the way that the coaching staff wants them to play, the philosophy. We've seen games evolve from their star players, but it's the next step that they need to take. And think about what the atmosphere is with this team. What the atmosphere has been great inside Canada Life Center this year. I think that there is a lot of excitement. You think about what we see from that top line and that idea that this team is never out of games, but what it would be like in mid-April and May as well, is if this team's able to have the success and be able to get those wins. Playoffs are great at any point in time. Playoffs in this city, having covered them in many other NHL cities, playoffs in this city are extra special.
I agree with that 100%. And I think all the Jets fans that are watching and listening on the podcast agree with you, Sarah. I wanted to ask you about Gabe Vilardi, because what the pass yesterday was ridiculous, but he just set a career high for assists in a season for himself with 19. He's already got 19 goals. Obviously, he had 22 last year. He's going to absolutely smash that. I think you'd agree that he's well on his way to a 30-plus goal season this year. What stood out to you about Vilardi this year? Obviously, he's in a contract year. Everybody knows that. That's something that's not in any of our controls. We'll have to wait and see, what his contract is. But what has stood out to you about Vilardi? Because I think when he was acquired, people knew that he was a goal scorer, but you're seeing him, I think, develop as an elite playmaker this year too.
Well, the chemistry between the three of them is really unbelievable. Whether you're looking at 5-on-5 or on the power play, obviously, you mentioned that pass, and we've seen it in a variety of different forms throughout this season. And I think the chemistry, he has found a great spot. Sometimes you just find line mates in where you click, and not to take anything, not to say he wouldn't have success if he was playing on a different line as well, but sometimes you just see the chemistry that exists between three players. And that's what we're seeing with this one. He has been so effective in my mind as a player, but also you think about the tips in front that he's able to do, his net front presence. I'd asked him about the tips, and you see you guys working on it. And as somebody that does not have great hand-eye coordination, I always marvel at guys that are able to do that so effectively. And he said that he works on it so much. He knew that he recognized early on that his skating was not going to be his strength to get him into the NHL. He said, so he needed to look and go, what can I do in order to get myself to an elite level and to be playing there? And so that's works on his hands all the time, and the different and in the different ways. And we've seen it pay off, whether that be through the great passes or, like I said, tips in front or some of the goals. I mean, the puck seems to find them. But that play last night, I love watching those three. And I think that they are a highlight reel, again, in all different forms, whether it be some of the passes that you see from Kyle Connor, same with Mark Scheifele, but then also their ability to score goals. And I don't think you always see that from a line. Sometimes it's just one person does one thing really well. And this year, with those three and the chemistry that they've had in seemingly all situations, you never know what you're going to get from any of them in terms of the highlight reel.
Here's a seamless transition as we bring in Jeff Merrick to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Party.
Jeff, say hi to Sarah. Sarah, say hi to Jeff. Nice
One
to
of
see
my
everybody this morning.
favorites.
Oh, please. This is really good. So, Sarah, I'm sure just finished saying a number of brilliant things and presented flawlessly. And now I'm going to do the audio equivalent of roller skating down a gravel road. How about that?
Don't sell yourself short, Jeff. You are a
You're supposed to-
well-seasoned broadcaster.
No,
as
you
well.
see, you're supposed to put the inferior guest on first, and then have like someone like Sarah as the headliner. This is
No,
totally
they-
opposite. Like I'm supposed to be the opening act here.
No, the
They
inferior.
did.
Go ahead. Sarah.
I come in with just a little bit here and there, incredibly way too long-winded stories, Jeff. Where
my
I
job.
said-
Not at all, Sarah.
and then you can come in and give all of the wonderful insight
No.
and
No,
additional
the-
stories.
The extent of my brilliance is, ooh, that's offside. Ooh, that's a bad pass. I think that's going to be icing, and we'll be right back.
Hey,
That's about
Jeff,
the extent of it. After
but
that,
if you knew what goaltending interference was, that would really be excellent insight. Then.
okay, can I pause on that?
Yes.
Goalie interference right now. Am I in the minority on this one? I think it's easier to call than ever. To me, goalie interference this year has been the most consistently correctly called infraction in the NHL. There are simple rules and little sing-alongs that everyone can follow that allow you to understand what the call is going to be. And the easiest one is this. If you're in the blue, that's on you. Think, for your entire audience here, think in terms of liability. If any part of your body is in the blue paint, when the puck goes in, your liability goes sky high. And it doesn't matter what you do or how slightly you touch the goaltender, that thing is coming back. Let's say it all together. If you're in the blue, that's on you.
I love it. A limerick on the Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I guess, Sarah, you have a game day to prepare for, so we'll say thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Can I ask Sarah
Always.
one question? Can I ask Sarah one question before she leaves? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just like hijacking the show. Really, I'm an awful guest. I think this is the game of the day. Like I think there's like a dozen games on the go around the NHL. This to me, like last night, and I'm sure we're going to get to this in a couple of seconds. Last night was the first time I said, okay, you know what? That felt like a playoff game. Like I'm watching a playoff game, not an opening round playoff game. Opening round is just parade to the penalty box and there's candy in the box and the referee is sending guys in. But last night had like a playoff vibe about it. And transitioning today, I look at the schedule this week, have a look at Saturday. Saturday's always a big one. And saying to myself, that is going to be the playoff game of the week. Got a taste last night. Sarah, does it feel to you like tonight with this Winnipeg, Colorado game, this is going to be a playoff style game?
I always think that a Jets Avs game has that playoff sort of feel. I was saying, see, now, Jeff, I mean, you made the comment about how it felt like a playoff game tonight. I was joking to the guys earlier that I said, I really hope that that's not exactly what we have in store for the playoffs, because I would like a little bit more. I am all for a tight game, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love a little bit more action for the playoffs.
But Dylan Sandberg blocking shots, Sarah, this has playoffs all over it. It's beautiful.
That is fantastic. I still want a little bit more of a mix. The excitement that we see, I reference it as being, that defensive battle that you see in football games sometimes. And I go, yeah, that's great. I just want a little bit more action as well. Not as much as the end-to-end that sometimes we see in Avs Jets. You think about game one last year between those two teams. I mean, I'm not saying we need that. I'm just saying a little bit more. But I think that this game tonight should have a bit more for it. And we know that the intensity that exists when in divisional games anyways in the Central Division, but with these two teams and what's at stake, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think with Connor Hellebuck in net as well, it should be a great game. I also am interested to see how the Jets play tonight, because when we know that they haven't had success in the second game of back-to-backs this season, they haven't had the opportunity to have one at home. Does that make a difference to not have to travel in for the second game of the back-to-back? We'll see tonight. But Saturday night, when you've got Avs Jets downtown Winnipeg, I'll take it anytime.
Absolutely.
I swear, guys, get a hand the recreation back over.
Go ahead.
Jeff, it's all good. You're a host, so go ahead.
No, I'm a bad one because I'm jumping all over you guys, and it's your show. So if I put on my Sarah Orlesky decoder ring, what you just said there very subtly is Connor Hellebuck is playing tonight, so the Winnipeg Jets are going to score more than 1 goal.
Oh,
Is that what you're saying?
very quickly. I know that the guys talked about this. I know that because I was listening earlier, and I know that you guys had brought up about Eric Comrie.
Yeah.
To me, Eric Comrie is one of the nicest men that you will ever meet in the game of hockey, or just period. And I think it's the perfect example of how sometimes you look at records, and if you don't have context with them, that you don't appreciate what's going on. Because you look at Eric Comrie, and I mean, yes, his numbers aren't bad overall, but if you look at his record, you look and go, oh, that you know, they're really struggling with that backup netminder, and it is not his fault. I mean, they have scored 11 goals combined in his last 7 starts. He has given them. He has played well when he has been called upon, but short of him scoring, well, there's only so much that one man can do. So
Agreed.
I am sincerely hoping that when the next time he gets in at some point, these guys have got to get this man a win. But he has played well, and hopefully we'll see more tonight in terms of goals. See, even though it can be a playoff-like game, that can still more than 1 or 2 goals in a 60-minute game, I would take.
There you go. I think we'll get that. Hopefully we'll get that tonight.
I'm all about entertainment, and you know, I always think about it from a television standpoint or numbers and everything. And so we like to be entertained for it. Right? Connor Hellebuck said the other night, we're entertainers, which I wanted to clip. And remind him of that, and remind everybody of that. This is sports entertainment.
I think you're going to do your Gladiator. Are you not entertained?
I know, are you not entertained? I know one person. Guys, could you imagine if that is my dream. In a post-game interview, could you imagine on the bench if someone walked around and did the, are you not entertained? Ugh.
It's something that can happen. Maybe tonight,
yeah.
Sarah.
Well, Jeff is a big wrestling fan. I think he'd love it too if it had that element of it.
Go back to the live audio wrestling days, right, Jeff?
Oh, bless you. Oh man, when back when broadcasting was fun, and it wasn't a job, and it wasn't a heavy lift, and you could just say whatever you want and shot from the hip and.
Well, you can do that on this show, so you're back home. There's no rules here.
I've already hijacked it just because I love talking to Sarah. I'm like, I get a chance to talk to Sarah Lesky. Yeah, sorry, boys. Yeah, day late, dollar short. Park it, put your feet up. I got her Lesky for a few minutes.
Sarah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to listen to Jeff and you guys on the rest of the show, and continued success, Jeff, with the new show as well.
God bless you. Thanks, Sarah. You read that exactly as I wrote it.
Hey, that's what I'm here for.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much, guys.
See you later. There she goes, Sarah Orlesky. Jeff Merrick, host of The Sheet on Daily Faceoff, joins us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Jeff, good morning.
Morning. Yeah, sorry to just hijack that one, but I'm like, you give me a chance to say anything to Sarah Orlesky. I've been like, and I've gotten to know Sarah over the years, and I mean, I don't need to tell you guys how much of a gem and how much of a pro and how, you know, such a silky.
She's ours, Jeff. She's Manitoba's. You can't have her.
Come back to Ontario, Sarah. Come back to Ontario. You're missed. Yeah, she's an absolute delight. I have all the time in the world for Sarah, as we all do.
Yes, we do. We appreciate you joining us. Welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
No problem.
Let's get right into it, Jeff. We were talking about last night's game. We were talking about Connor Hellebuck. You know,
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question. Okay, show of hands. And already I'm going to put my hand up. Who thought Velarde was shooting?
Oh, that's a good one.
When he got that pass.
I'm going to be honest, Jeff. I'm honest. I'm the honest one here.
You guys did, like, honestly, like, Drew, Dave, you didn't think he was shooting when he got that pass before he slid over to Shifley?
They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So
I know. No. I know that they know what they're doing. But I'm saying, did you bite? Like, did you get?
We watch them a lot.
Did you get the hook in your mouth?
I was. Jeff, I'll tell you, I was impressed by it.
I was thrilled by it. But the thing is, like, when I think about Gabriel Velarde, I think dots down, one of the best in the NHL. Mm-hmm. Like, dots in, you can't lift up the stick. Dots in, like, that's where that guy makes all of his money. And this goes back to the Windsor Spitfires, right? When I first started watching Gabe Velarde and that team, and 2017 that won the Memorial Cup. Velarde dots down was an absolute beast, monster. Anything around the net, it was on his stick and it was going in the net. So that is, maybe it's just my own bias, but I always think anytime it's down low and Velarde's got his puck on the stick around the net, like that's why I was so impressed by it.
Yeah.
First of all, gorgeous pass. Second of all, everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody because you guys didn't bite, but most people that have followed Gabe Velarde for a long time will say that's a Velarde shot 9 times out of 10. Not so. Good for him. And and Scheifele, brilliant, stays inside the dots for it. A lot of guys who try to be like try to hide and get out of the play for a long one-timer. He's inside the dots on the play. Beautiful. Hang it in the
They
loop.
are so in sync right now on the power play.
Yeah.
That it's poetry. I think first of all, on the power play, the game is slowed down so significantly for them that they're always a half a step ahead of their opponents as of late or throughout the course of the first 40 something games of this year. Just the way that they are anticipating and just moving even without the puck and to put one another in advantageous positions is really something to behold on this power play so far.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now it helps when you have elite level skill too. I mean, but the thing is, I was so this week Andrew Raycroft was on our daily face-off morning show called Morning Cup of Hockey, and he gave to me one of the best interviews I heard of anybody all week long. And he talked about the Bruins power play, which is abysmal. Trust me, I'm going to bring this back to Winnipeg. He talked about the Bruins power play, which I think is still 31st in the NHL. Bruins have a big game later on this afternoon against the Florida Panthers. Times are tough right now, as you guys know, with the Boston Bruins. But he was bringing up the point because the guys, like Colby Cohen and Johnny Lazarus, were saying, like, with all this skill, like, you should be able to manufacture goals. And, like, with all that skill, how do you end up, like, 31st? And he said, it's hard. This one really stuck with me. I thought about this a lot this week. It's really hard to get highly skilled players to simplify a power play because that's not how they're wired. And I'd never heard anyone frame it like that before, but it makes a lot of sense. Elite level, highly skilled players are wired differently than everybody else. And in a lot of ways, it's hard to get these guys to simplify even just a low-high across play yesterday, like we saw with Connor Velarde and Mark Scheifele, because they're not that's not how they think. That's not how they process, and that's not how they play. And that's one of the challenges the Boston Bruins face right now, is trying to simplify a power play just to try to get a couple of power play goals along the way here. Like, I think, like, honestly, to me, getting an elite player to completely break the instincts, which are, I'm going to do something that everybody else can't do. To me, that's coaching. Like, to me, I look at that and I say, elite players, sure, but the way that Scott Arniel has elite players playing, and breaking that mindset of I'm going to do things differently than everybody else because I can, that to me is coaching. Like I look at that and I say, that one's Scott Arniel. That's completely selfless by everybody. Again, most times, most elite players in the NHL take that shot that Velarde had in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
But he did. Now, you can be guilty, as Tampa has been for a number of years, of overpassing on the power play just because they can. But I don't see that with the Winnipeg Jets. They're like, it's almost like the Jets are right on that line, but they haven't crossed it like Tampa has occasionally over the past 5 years.
Absolutely. And, Jeff, just getting away from the Jets for a second, and if we have time with you, we do want to ask you about the Elias Pettersson, JT Miller situation. We just can't not talk about that. It's really everybody
coming on Tuesday
across the NHL. But I wanted to go back to the sheet. And I'm not going to call you Ruthless Jeff Merrick, but you did have Ruthless Gary Lawless on, and I watched that entire interview. Gary's an old friend of ours, obviously.
Yeah, I love
Back
Gary.
to the TSN 1290 radio days. We've definitely shared some beers and some sandwiches together in the past. Gary, if he's listening, will understand that one. He's probably not. He doesn't like our show. I'm just kidding. But no, we just wanted to ask you about the sheet. I listened to Berkey as well yesterday. He was really good. I watched Aaron Ambrose. Just tell us about the show, because obviously a lot of people are enjoying it so far.
I really appreciate that. I won't bore you too long here. So it's Monday to Friday, 3:00 Eastern, 1 Mountain, on our Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. It is 1 hour. So you mentioned Brian Berkey's on every Fridays. That's become one of the more popular shows. It's essentially ask Berkey whatever you want. And Brian, like, you ask him a question, he'll give you an answer. Yesterday, talking about Cleon Daskalaskis, the old BU goaltender, had a cup of coffee with the Boston Bruins, who used to call the Burke household when Berkey was an agent and order pizzas. So young Patrick Burke, who now works at the Department of Player Safety with the NHL, would have to answer phone calls from Cleon Daskalaskis trying to order pizzas. So that's a lot of fun. Greg Wyshynski's aboard for old MVSW on Tuesdays. You mentioned Aaron Ambrose. PWHL is near and dear to my heart, and women's hockey is and girls hockey is the biggest growth area of the sport, period. If we want the sport to be healthy, support the women's game. And then it's just like it's like a revolving door of various guests. Peter McGuire stops by every week or every couple of weeks as well. So we try to mix it up and keep it as different as possible and try to reflect what the big story of the day is every day. So Monday to Friday, 3 Eastern on our Daily Face-Off YouTube channel, then available wherever you get your podcasts, and also available on YouTube and archives as well. Okay, back to business.
Back to business, Jeff, and we're going to talk, as you said, we're going to get away from the Jets, but I'm going to bring it back to the Jets, not because that's the focus here of a Manitoba-based show.
Who hates each other? Who's feuding? We got Miller and Pedersen. There's all the reports yesterday about Brad Marchand and David.
Yeah,
Pasta.
I saw that.
Every team's got to have a public feud. Who's Winnipeg's?
Marchand's comments. Sorry for interrupting. Marchand ripping the radio host in Boston there was just absolute glory to see him just go off on it. He's going to get a hat trick or something today for the Bruins just as a result of that.
Well, if he does, it is a very tall order. The Florida Panthers, to me, the Florida Panthers right now are pacing themselves through the season, but every now and then, the Florida Panthers will rip off a game where it's like, oh, the Florida Panthers are reminding everybody just how good they are. Because they're like, yeah, we're not going to go, to the wall 82 games. But every now and then they'll be like, oh, yeah, let's not forget just how good the Panthers are. They're not going to win the Presidents. They're not interested in that. They're pacing themselves for the playoffs. And I have a feeling a game like this afternoon could be one of those games where the Florida Panthers remind everybody how good they are. But if Marchand can have a command performance, that makes it doubly good, I suppose.
Well, that's fascinating. But the question I have for you in terms of Connor Hellebuyck, I mean, we had to take him a little bit for granted. We've watched him, of course, we've covered him since the Manitoba Moose days, a little bit with the Ice Caps, but of course, here, what he's doing. But it's not often you see a Vezina goaltender make his Vezina years look ordinary, and that's what he's doing right now. And we know his focus is solely on winning one thing. It's not the William Jennings. It's not another Vezina. It's a Stanley Cup. But from your perspective, for a guy who watches, across the league, but also Connor Hellebuyck, what are you seeing from him this year as he elevates his game to that next level?
So I'm glad you framed it that very particular way. I'm glad you put that type of frame around Connor Hellebuyck and the Connor Hellebuyck conversation, because it reminds me of talking to Jay Woodcroft when he coached the Edmonton Oilers. And we were talking about Connor McDavid. And in the middle of one of my long-winded questions, I'm incapable of short audio clip. In one of my long, rambly questions, he stopped me and he said, look, don't be numb to what you're seeing. Don't be numb to greatness. I know you can take it for granted because you see it every day, but consciously, de-numb yourself because what you're seeing is special. Now, he was framing it in terms of Connor McDavid. And trust me, the way that you're talking about Connor Hellebuyck, Dave, and how Winnipeg Jets fans may just take it for granted. It's, it's Connor Hellebuyck. Oh, it's a Connor Hellebuyck save. Ho-hum. Don't be numb to it. Because what you're seeing in an era where I don't think, in a salary cap era, I don't think it's right to expect goaltenders to steal games. I think you can look at goaltenders and say, we need this guy to steal a period, or we need this guy to steal 2 periods. The Winnipeg Jets have a goaltender that legitimately can steal games. And he will always deflect and say, I've been the same goalie I've always been. It's the blue line in front of me, and I know where shots are coming from. It's very predictable, and that's a reflection of my blue line. That's a reflection of the responsibility of my forwards who are playing more defensive, blah, 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 blah. Don't be numb to it. What you're seeing is greatness, and embrace it because, trust me, everybody outside of Winnipeg is looking at this. And it's post-World War I, a lot of Europe had immigrant fantasies about going to America. The streets are paved with gold. That's how people feel about Winnipeg and this luxury, this luxury item that they have in Nest.
Except the streets are paved with ice.
and then when the ice melts, the streets are crumbling with potholes. Aside from that, though.
Well, you trust me. If you're in a Canadian city and the streets are crumbling with potholes, don't feel special. Toronto, Montreal, etc. go all the way from coast to coast to coast.
It's the one thing that unites us all as Canadians is crumbling streets and potholes.
We take pride in our sinkholes.
Jeff,
ruined transmissions from coast to coast. Yes, sorry,
right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know that you're up against it, and we appreciate you joining us, and you had a tight time frame. But we mentioned, and as he mentioned, just the situation in Vancouver.
Sure.
Can it last? Can it continue on? Where not all, lots of times teams aren't hunky dory in their dressing room, and guys don't always, see eye to eye. But to have it be so public and so basically acknowledged as fact is a unique phenomenon that I really can't remember a comparison for, at least in recent history.
It's a great question. There's a couple of things that come from it. One, I feel like I shouldn't comment or make judgment on what needs to happen with these two until I or we know what the root of the problem is. Mm-hmm. Like all we've been told or all we've been led to believe, and there's all kinds of whispers and rumors and all of that, but there's been no one has come out to say specifically what the issue is. And that's why when I hear anyone say, well, these guys just need to get in a room and work it out. Well, to be blunt, like we're all grown-ups, allegedly. We're all grown-ups. Like we know there are some issues that you can't get past. I always think about the cliche, like in some situations, the lamb doesn't meet the lion halfway because that only benefits the lion. So I don't know what the exact situation is. So I'm unprepared to say that, they need to get in a room and work it all out and do whatever they can. And Quinn Hughes is the captain, who I believe has already tried to broker peace between the two. And Rick Tocchet is the head coach, who we believe has tried to broker peace between the two. I'm uncomfortable saying like these two need to get in the room and sort it out. But to sharpen a sort of finer point on your point in question, Drew, what I wonder about is like I'm already past. This is me like getting ahead of myself always. I'm sort of past the point of what do they do, because it very much sounds like one or both are going, right? Like this can only you can't let, as an organization, you just can't let this continue and fester. We know it's not going to get better. The question that I'm wondering about now is, and we've seen this before, if you get rid of one, how does that dressing room react? Especially when you have a situation, and I don't know, but you look at hockey history, and I'll go back to the Montreal Canadiens centennial season, where right down the room it was Camp Koivu and Camp Kovalev, right? It was you're in one of the two camps. We saw it before in Toronto with Corson, Tucker, Green camp and the Ty Domi camp, and like it was down the room. My question now about this is, and this is why I wonder if Elliott stumbled across something last Saturday on Hockey Night by saying they may even just trade two here. If you trade one, what happens to the players if there is like a significant split? And I'm not saying that there is because I don't know, but if there is, what happens to the players in the room who were loyal to that player or on the side of the player who just got traded? You might think that you're eliminating the issue. I shouldn't say, embers are still burning considering the situation that we're all watching the horror in California, but I think you know what I'm going for here. Will there still be residue based on, like player loyalty to one guy? Sheet. Almost kind of like that, right, Drew? Like that's what I wonder about here, because even if you get rid of one, it doesn't necessarily mean the problem. If there is a problem that is sort of spidered out to the entire room, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's gone. That's why I wonder a lot about Elliott's point from Saturday if they end up getting rid of both of them. It's great. It's a great question.
It's a fascinating situation to watch just from the outsider's perspective. I mean, and you mentioned Elliott. I mean, he's got his phrase that when teams are desperate or when teams sense desperation, they throw anvils. They don't throw life jackets. So that all of the other teams in the league who are making their offers are trying to buy these guys or buy their contractual rights for pennies on the dollar.
As Brian Burke will always say, they're pirates. GMs are pirates. Brian used to always he loves telling the stories about the days when he first broke in as a general manager. And he said, it was him and like Glenn Sather and Lou when he had like a lot of speed on his fastball. He said the way that they judge trades is if you made a trade and the other general manager got fired, that was a good trade. You judge trades by who got fired because of it. It's not like that anymore.
Not so much. The camaraderie is a little bit more significant than it used to be, but that would be the good old days, the bad old days, whatever you want to call them. Either way, the best days are Mondays to Fridays at 2 p.m. Central on Daily Face-Off. The Sheets with Jeff Merrick.
Jeff, keep calling Gary ruthless, because anything to get under Gary's skin, I'm okay with.
Do you know the story of that? Can I bore you with 2 seconds with a quick close? So I threw out there, like when Vegas was making all of their not very popular moves. Yeah. I didn't mean ruthless as a pejorative. It wasn't an insult. It was actually a compliment that this team will do whatever it takes to win the Stanley Cup. And I referred to it a couple of different times, both podcasts and on television, as the ruthless pursuit of the Stanley Cup. And there's one person in Vegas that really, really, and it wasn't Gary, but there's one person who really, really didn't like that. And, but again, like, and I would say to this person, like, look, I didn't say that as a pejorative. I'm actually envious that there is that old school, I don't care how we have to do it. I don't care how much China we have to break on the shelves to get there, but we're going to win the Stanley Cup. And if there's casualties along the way, so be it.
Yeah. And Jeff, hey, let's bring this full circle. You mentioned you're a wrestling fan, so am I. The Ruthless Aggression era was a pretty good era in WWE, right? So nothing wrong with the word ruthless.
May you live in interesting times, and that was clearly one of the most interesting times in the history of the game. Absolutely, totally true.
Jeff Merrick, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll do it again real soon.
Thanks so much,
Appreciate your time, Jeff. Take care.
Buzz back anytime.
We'll do. Take care, Jeff. Boys. There he goes, Jeff Merrick, joining us this morning. How's that for a last hour or so of broadcast?
It's been chaotic. Well, especially the last 40 minutes. It's been Thunderdome.
We don't often go five people on the screen at once. I don't know that we've ever done that before.
No, we have. I mean, remember we had Remo and Richie on for the 50th anniversary show, which was
real people, Dave, real guests, not.
No, we have.
Nobody cares.
No, we did do it. We've definitely done it before. I remember when we've done. Who did we do it?
We actually did it. No, if you want to go back a few years, we had Kenny Weeb and Craig Button live.
That's who it was. That's who it was. Yes,
and we actually did. Yes. I want to say we did like an hour to hour and a half.
Yeah,
with the 5-man unit with Craig basically breaking draft picks down live.
Yeah,
which was pretty awesome. So once in a while we bring out the 5-man crew.
Yeah, we don't mind.
Or the 5-person crew.
We don't mind it because it means that there's less talk time for Drew. So it's always a good thing for us.
It's a win-win for everyone.
I mean, we're not talking anymore, but that's fine because we weren't anyways. But this way, at least Drew's mic time is reduced.
My mic time will be reduced as we go to a commercial break. How about that as well? Much more of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show to come on this Saturday morning. Don't go anywhere.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling sites instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Center. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Center. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in 2 unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
This January at Boston Pizza, every day is Pasta Tuesday. That means BP's famous pastas start at just $11.99 every single day. Create your own or go gourmet for just a few bucks more. Come on in for Pasta Tuesday pricing any day. Only this January at Boston Pizza.
Bottom of hour number 2. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. We'll be back a little bit later on tonight after the Jets and the Avalanche for the Illegal Curve post-game show. So be sure to join us right around 8:45 p.m., right around there. Give or take a couple minutes. We'll be back to talk about the Jets and the Avs, a key Central Division matchup, a rivalry game, a lot of excitement about it. You heard Jeff Merrick speaking about it, saying it's the marquee game on the very busy Saturday docket in the NHL. Naturally, it's not getting the attention and the love that it deserves, but that's usually what happens with us here in Winnipeg. C'est la vie. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show brought to you by Play Now. Learn to bet with Play Now, the official betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets. Sign up and get up to $250 in bonus bets. Conditions apply. 18 plus. Enjoy responsibly. What are you guys looking for in tonight's game between the Jets and the Avs? We know
More goals.
More goals. Good answer. Thank you. End of the segment. Good night, everybody. We'll see you later.
Well, no, I mean, Sarah touched on it
Yeah,
when
know.
we had her on. Like, I mean,
Sorry,
there are some 2-1 games, Drew, that are exciting, and then there's last night's game.
Did you get the impression, Scott Arneal saying it was a playoff style game? You heard Jeff say that. Did you get that impression last night? Because
I did. I think Drew. Well, like I think
Not from an excitement perspective, Drew.
exactly. I think
from the
I think
vibe, I
Dave-
didn't get.
Yeah.
I didn't
Well, there's
feel
a
it.
difference, Drew, between playoff style and playoff feel, right?
Yeah, okay,
I don't
fair
think it had a playoff feel. I mean, and I mean, I think the crowd would agree with that, right? It was not. There was not a lot to cheer about for Jets fans inside Canada Life, even though it was a packed house, right? But I think the style, like the LA Kings, Drew, you mentioned this on the postgame show last night. Like they are playing their 1-3-1. They are perfecting that defensive style of hockey, and they should be because they don't have Nathan McKinnon. They don't have Mikko Rantanen. They don't have Cale Makar. They don't have Drew Doughty right now. And, they've found a brand of hockey, a style of hockey that is working for them right now. But no, I wouldn't say it had a playoff feel, Drew.
Yeah, to me, it just I didn't quite get that vibe.
I think Scott Arneal, Dave, meant more so the style of hockey.
Checking of it.
Yeah, I think he just meant I definitely not from an entertainment standpoint, not from an excitement standpoint, because we
were not entertained.
I was not entertained. No, I was trying not to fall asleep is what I was trying to do, but
tonight should be more entertaining then. So I guess back to my original question about what you're sort of expecting. These two teams met each other 10 days ago on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
A game that was probably closer than the score reflected. I would say the Jets were, the Jets were on the second half of a back-to-back again, much like they are tonight, although no travel this time. They were, they gave it their all against the Avs on New Year's Eve, but they came up short. Different circumstances for tonight, even though it's a back-to-back, but no travel, like I said.
Yeah, and I would say that there's a impetus by the Winnipeg Jets not to allow Colorado to kind of control the narrative. Now, that didn't work for Winnipeg last year in the playoffs when Colorado, steamrolled them. But at the same time, it's an unusual kind of scenario, right? The LA Kings were in town for a couple of days. The Colorado Avalanche got in town, so they were in Winnipeg yesterday watching the Jets and the Kings do battle and getting a chance to kind of, get themselves ready after they steamrolled the Minnesota Wild in St. Paul the other night. I think it was a 6-2 final for Colorado. And as you mentioned on the show last night, Drew, they're 8-1-1 in their last 10. So this team with some goaltending, Ezzy, is feeling very good about themselves and about their game and where they're at, as they've gone from a team that, just wasn't producing, or I shouldn't say that, was scoring a lot of goals, but was also giving up a lot of goals. And that was their biggest handicap. And we talked about the fact that this team, their goal differential was actually abysmal, right? And so you looked at Colorado and you thought, this doesn't make any sense. Like, they're scoring a ton, but they've also given up a ton. And look, if you look at their goal differential right now, it's back to the positive. They're plus 12. They're still giving up 135 goals, right? For context, the Jets have given up 108. So there's a big disparity there. But as I just outlined, they were in the negative for a lot of this year. They were scoring a lot. They were giving up a lot. That team is not this team anymore. Now they are stopping the puck and still scoring a lot.
To your point, in the last month of action, the Colorado Avalanche, in 13 games played, have given up the third fewest goals in the entire NHL. The Kings are at the top. We saw them last night. Yeah. 25 goals against in 11 games played. Then the Devils have given up 28 over the last month, and then the Avs at 29. The Jets, for reference sake, 32. So both teams, of course, as you'd expect, are good at keeping the puck out of their net. The Jets, that's their MO. We know that about the Jets. It's the Avalanche over the last month that have begun to shore up their defensive game and stabilize. I mean, they knew they couldn't trust their goaltending. So I'll give the Avs management credit. They overhauled their goaltending mid-season, which isn't necessarily easy to do. And it seems like the players have responded because they feel as though they have a goalie who can make a save when they need a save made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just pulled up Mackenzie Blackwood's numbers, and in 10 games or 9 starts with the Avalanche, he's 8-1 with a 1.61 goals against, but it's the 940 save percentage, guys, that stands out, right? So going back to what you said, I think, to me, this is why you have a pro scouting staff. This is, to me, a pro scouting win for the Colorado Avalanche. And that's what we heard about Mackenzie Blackwood. Dave and I were there. No, Drew, you weren't there. I'm just bugging you. In South Florida in 2015, Mackenzie Blackwood.
You guys had your date. That was the draft you guys went out on as a date together.
I mean, take me back to Del Boca Vista in Florida, Dave. We had a great time in South Florida for that draft. Obviously, the Jets.
Although somehow Kenny Weeb joined our trip to the Miami Marlins game and then ditched us the moment we got to the stadium.
Yes.
Weber, Ezzy, and I. So he let's just say he pilfered a ride with us from Del Boca Vista, as he just outlined, to the game in Miami. And then we got to the stadium. We're like, okay, Kenny, Ezzy and I were going to go buy tickets. And all of a sudden, Kenny just disappeared. He was gone. So
did he get a ride home with you, though?
I believe he did, actually. That was the insult to injury, if you will.
He was. I feel like, Dave, later in the game, we went down and sat with him because he was in like the 10th or 15th row or something, if I can remember. This is like 9 years ago, and we're getting way off track here. But
it was 10. It was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, but Dave and I were exactly. Dave and
you guys were in the upper deck nosebleeds.
Yes.
And Kenny
no.
We actually had. We were in the. We actually weren't in nosebleeds. We had decent seats. But
look, clearly the Altona Minor Baseball Association is more important than the Jewish Softball League when it comes to baseball hierarchy.
How many times did the House of Ashkenazi win, Dave? Like 10 times they've won.
We had a few championships.
Won the championship. I think Dave should have gotten a little bit more respect. I think I should have gotten a little more respect. I caught a few fly balls for the House of Ashkenazi
because you missed them.
No, that's you, Drew, in Philadelphia. But
that was me in Philly. That was a home run.
But guys, going back to the Colorado Avalanche season, Mackenzie Blackwood has been an absolute game changer. We just talked about the numbers, the 940 save percentage in 9 starts with the Avalanche. And, so you got to give the Avalanche credit. I think Drew and I were both pretty critical of giving Blackwood that big 5-year contract, but
I still don't understand giving him the big contract.
It looks like they got in front of it, though, Drew. It's looking pretty good. Early, small sample size, but it's looking pretty good right now.
I think there's a lot of, from my understanding, talking to people who paid attention to that, because I'm not going to pretend to have watched Mackenzie Blackwood when he was with the Sharks, or any other team, quite frankly. But the fact of the matter is that the folks who pay attention to goaltenders, I think, felt that if you gave him a strong team to play on, like, as if it's not a shocking thought, like if you do that for a lot of guys.
Look at Darcy Kemper in LA.
Right, exactly. But I think that, again, we talk about it. It's not like Colorado's changed their style, Drew. They just have more confidence in a goaltender who's able. So I think he's maybe adapted to how they play. But the fact of the matter is, look, I think Ezzy's 100% right. I think the Avs management felt this was going to be their guy. And, you know, to the return to what Jeff just talked about. So if you have to trade him for pennies on the dollar, then you have to trade him. Or if you have to bury him, you have to bury him. But the fact of the matter is they obviously felt confident. They wanted to get him. They didn't give up a lot to get him. And now they've got their biggest weakness. When we talked about the Avalanche, when we talked about them last year, when we talked about them, like think about what was their one weakness last year was goaltending.
Yep.
If you remove that weakness, this Colorado Avalanche team is a very scary hockey team and not one that anybody's going to want to face in the first round.
No, and that's why
we're
I
assuming, by the way, we're
Yeah.
assuming it's going to be Blackwood tonight. We don't know that. Trent Miner, the local kid, could get the start. He got his first start, I think, 2 games ago for the Avs. If I'm
Marner's
not
from
mistaken.
Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not inconceivable that the local kid will get a start, in Winnipeg. I would doubt it, given that this game has a little bit of a significance, division game, 4-point game, as the cliche
Well, think
goes.
about what Scott Arniel said yesterday in our media availability with him. He talked about they're holding Connor Hellebuck. I mean, yesterday's the game that the Jets had gone into their back-to-backs as. They were 4-0 in the first game. Not so good in the second game of the back-to-back. Now, this is, of course, different because you're not changing cities, as Drew has touched on. You're staying in your own bed. You're getting to bed at a decent hour. But at the same time, he was holding out Connor Hellebuck for tonight's game, I should say. If it's a win, I'm sure he'll be very happy. But he wanted Connor Hellebuck to be available because he knew that beating LA is important, of course. And he said, no disrespect to the Kings, but this is a divisional game. This is a game that, if you can hold the Avalanche to no points, a team that is red hot as you don't want, they're 5 points back of Winnipeg. That's not insurmountable.
Absolutely. And I think, guys, one of the keys here, and we talked about this last year in the playoffs, and we talked about it recently when the Jets played the Avalanche. Between Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, you've got 128 points already. Like it's actually absurd. McKinnon's running away with it a little bit. He's got 68 points already. Rantanen's got 60. For most forwards, that's a good season already. And we're only halfway through the season, right, guys? Yeah. So it's you've got to keep in context just what these guys are doing. But we always talk about this, but it's true. McKinnon and Rantanen, we're not going to pretend we would be NHL head coaches if we knew how to shut these guys down, because not many teams in the NHL can shut these. Maybe the LA Kings can, but there's not many teams in the NHL that can shut these guys down. So you just want to limit their opportunities. But what we've always said is with the Jets and the Avalanche matchup is you don't want to get into a situation where you're straying away from the style of hockey that's made you successful. And I think that's what's happened in the past. It certainly happened at times in the best of 7 series last year in the first round, right? The Avalanche have the ability. They have the best players in the league with McKinnon, Rantanen, and Cale Makar. Not to mention Valerie Nichushkin, not to mention, some of the other good players they have, Jonathan Drouin, the list goes on. It's a very good team. I agree with you, Dave. This is the one team in the Central Division that if I'm the Jets, I don't want to play. They don't match up well against the Avalanche. I'm not saying that the Jets can't beat the Avalanche in a 7-game series, but this Avalanche team is just so dangerous. And now that you've thrown in Mackenzie Blackwood, their goaltending situation is solidified, right? So I think for the Jets, you have to make sure that if you get down a goal, or if you get down maybe a couple goals, that you don't completely change the style and you don't sacrifice defense for offense. That's what I would say. There's everybody watching, everybody listening on the podcast knows what the Avalanche can do. This team won the Stanley Cup 3 years ago. They've still got relatively the same core of players. They're dangerous. If you're the Jets, you need to minimize the damage and make sure that you're playing that style of defensive hockey that's got you this much success, and you have to stick to it. And we've seen the Jets do this.
That's what Scott Arniel said last night. He said that that one of the things he liked about his team as of late is that they don't change their style no matter the game scenario, no matter the game score, no matter the situation of the game. Their game has looked fairly consistent. And you're right. It's going to be Colorado. We know the speed they play with. I mean, you watch LA last night. I mean, this is going to be like the games in fast forward compared to last night's game. Not that LA is slow, but just that they are stifling. And
it's honestly like Jekyll and Hyde. It's like you're going. LA and Colorado couldn't be further ends of the spectrum than they are.
And they're dangerous. I mean, the Avs are a very dangerous team. Not a back-to-back for them, but it is their third game in 4 nights. They played Wednesday in Chicago, Thursday in Minnesota, and then here tonight against the Jets. So, I mean, both teams are, again, the schedule's a grind for every team. So that won't be any sort of issue. The Jets, in fact, have been a little bit on the soft side of the schedule. Give some practice time, like you mentioned, the small area drills to get them geared up for a playoff sort of run that Scott Arniel was referencing and that you mentioned earlier in the program, Dave. So the Jets are certainly going to be have to be on their toes. I mean, they've had success against Colorado in regular season. They they played them. It was certainly a competitive game on New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
I expect it to be very similar tonight, Dave.
Yeah, I like I said, I think that the Jets, if you think about what Jeff said, Jeff's not in this market, but he pays attention to hockey, and he knows if he's geared up and he's got this game as kind of a must-watch game, a game that he's eager to watch. That the Jets are aware. They don't want to be embarrassed. They also are aware of the fact that Dallas and Colorado are hard charging. Minnesota, 2 points behind you. Those other two teams I just mentioned, 5 points back.
Yeah.
The Jets have given themselves a very good position. They are a playoff team. Of that, there is no question. But are they the number one team in the Central? They have not solidified that to any great degree. So this is going to be a big test for them. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think that you're right, Drew. Like it's been a bit unfortunate in the sense that the Jets have had the second game of a back-to-back against Colorado. That has definitely been a little bit of a disadvantage, of course. But to me, the key for Winnipeg's success is what Ezzy two things. It's what Ezzy just said, which is to not get out of your structure, not try and play run and gun. Don't allow 1,000 rush chances because that's not going to end well. And also having a good start because, you're going to have to really come out and kind of establish, get the crowd. It's going to be a sold out building. I think you're going to want to have the fans behind you, give them something to cheer about, give the Avs a little pause. You want to punch them first before you take a punch.
Do you expect any lineup changes? Now, we obviously did no morning skate, so we won't know about anything until later on, which, of course, you can keep it locked to illegalcurve.com for all of that latest information. We know Hellebuyck's going to be in net.
Yeah.
The forwards, assuming everybody made it out unscathed from last night's game, you would expect the forward groups to be the same. The question to me would be Heinola versus Stanley as the third pairing left side.
Sure. Here we go again.
Well, I mean, it's not a matter of here we go again because, but do you expect that, we know that Stanley got the run in yesterday's game, and Scott Arniel himself said he's not married to the Stanley Coughlin, pairing, but for a defender who is slow, lacks foot speed, that's not a good situation, not a good scenario against the Colorado Avalanche team. Then conversely, Ville Heinola, if he's in the lineup, he's undersized, and we know that the Jets had a lot of difficulty keeping the Avs from the front of the net during the playoff series last year. So a bit of a pick your poison question, I guess. Do you have a preference between Heinola or Stanley, or a thought between the two as the third pairing left side defenseman for tonight?
Yeah, and not to steal your thunder, Drew, but Kenny Wiebe reported that it was a very optional skate. I'm not sure if you guys saw this on X. But he's saying that he doesn't expect Ville Heinola to play because he was among those skating. So that obviously makes it unlikely that he's going to play. But honestly,
I missed Ken's tweet.
Well, no, and that's why I'm bringing that to your attention.
Segment over.
No, but I'm bringing it to the audience's attention as well because, like Drew said on last week's show, going forward, it looks like most game day skates are going to be optional. So they're not going to give us a lot of insight